Hi, this is Dr. Emma Adam. I work at the Gluck Equine Research Centre, which, along with the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab, constitutes the Department of Veterinary Sciences at the University of Kentucky's College of Agriculture, Food and Environment. This presentation focuses on tips on biosecurity, particularly as they relate to equine rotavirus. As we all know, biosecurity is tough. It's difficult to implement, and unfortunately, there is no one-size-fits-all. It's a conversation that involves your farm team and your veterinary team to develop a program for each individual situation. Rotaviruses are a major diarrhea pathogen in humans and agricultural animals. This large group of viruses are subdivided into 9 subgroups assigned letters of the alphabet. Until 2021, rotavirus A was considered to be the only group that infected horses. The vaccine that we give to our mares during pregnancy is rotavirus A, strain G3. However, in 2021, the University of Kentucky identified a rotavirus from an outbreak of foal diarrhea where it was assigned to group B, a novel group to infect horses. This diagram on the right-hand side of the slide shows a rotavirus particle, and what's important to note about it is that it doesn't have a lipid envelope around it, and that can make a difference in terms of it's resistant to disinfection, how hard it can be to get rid of it in an environment, and also what types of disinfectants that we might use. So what are we up against? Well, we know that rotavirus is a pathogen that causes diarrhea in neonatal foals. The younger the foal, the more likely they are to get really sick with it. They can get infected and start showing signs as young as 12 to 24 hours of age. Typically, we see it around 2 days of age in naive populations. It's very difficult to clean up after rotavirus, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is that it is difficult to inactivate because it doesn't have that envelope around it, and because foals shed such huge numbers of rotavirus particles in their feces. For example, in piglets, it's up to 100 billion particles of virus per gram of feces, and foals can shed for up to 3 days after their diarrhea stops, which is an important consideration in terms of handling and biosecurity. It only takes a very small number of particles. In pigs, it's been demonstrated only 100 particles can cause infection in naive populations, and that makes rotavirus a highly contagious disease. There is evidence that rotaviruses can survive in the environment for up to 9 months, and of course, that means that we really don't want to put contaminated bedding or manure on the pastures because that represents us loading up our pastures. We also know that overcrowding is a risk factor for any disease outbreak due to traffic, pressure on staff, pressure on environment, etc., etc. Now, the foaling barn, of course, is the heart of any farm's operations during the breeding season and foaling season. And it's hard but necessary to develop a workable plan that all of your staff buy into, and cultural change can be hard. So sometimes that means instead of starting off with something that's really radical, introducing small steps until you actually need to pull the trigger on a significant biosecurity plan, for example. The things that can be included in routine biosecurity practices include wearing gloves, donning booties or special footwear that is only used in the foaling barn, using foot dips, and hygiene on your hands and clothing and boots in between stalls. And also making sure that you have a plan if a mare and her foal who becomes sick need isolating. Now, what about in terms of keeping the environment clean? We all know that's a challenge. And there is no real such thing as one-step cleaning. And the reason is that organic material can protect bacteria and viruses. So grease and fecal material that gets stuck on places can prevent disinfectants penetrating those areas to clean them. And of course, we estimate that adult horses can produce about 50 pounds of organic material per day. So that's a significant amount to deal with. Now, physically removing the organic material can in its own right decrease pathogen load by up to 90%. And that's why I have a picture of a box of Tide detergent, because that is an incredibly good way to remove organic material from the environment. But one thing I would stress, and that is, whilst pressure washing can be very easy to perform because it's less labor intensive, it does aerosolize a lot of organic material that may contain significant numbers of pathogens. So pressure washing a stall that you're going to be actively using within a barn is perhaps not a good idea at all. So we really recommend pressure washing only when the barn is completely empty and can stay empty for some time afterwards. So it's important we use our resources wisely, not just our labor, but also our pocketbook. We have to use things so that we make sure things are effective, and that means changing our foot dips frequently. That can be on a regular schedule, but more importantly, it has to be even in between those regular changes so that you've got fresh material and it's not inactivated by organic material, as you see this picture here on the left of the screen. Make sure your disinfectant is made up properly. Stronger is not always better, and so be economical and work out the exact amount of disinfectant that you need for a certain volume of water in your disinfectant bucket. You will have the best use of your disinfectant and also the best use of the concentration that you're going to need to kill the organisms you're trying to kill. Contact time is essential. It's important that whenever you clean any area, you ensure that the surface is wet with appropriate disinfectant after it's had its organic material removed and cleaned away, and make sure that it is wet for the entire contact period. So that can be quite important, particularly walls and stall floors and aisles of the barn. So what does biosecurity mean? Well, obviously our measures are to try and prevent disease coming onto the farm, or if it does exist on the farm, to prevent spread from one horse to the next, one barn to the next, and one surface to the next. So obviously reducing traffic in terms of foot traffic in a barn or visitors in a particular area can be very important. Leaf blowers, whilst very handy, do blow all that organic material that is laden with pathogens all over the barn. It's very difficult to prevent that from happening when you use a leaf blower, so we recommend not using a leaf blower. Again, as we mentioned, pressure washing can also do the same thing, driving all of that organic material all over the inside of a barn. So the things to consider for our personal protective equipment protocol at a minimum are gloves and foot covers and foot dips. Dedicated footwear in a particular barn can be very helpful because plastic booties can be quite slippery, make a lot of noise, and easily develop a puncture in them. Double gloving can be very helpful so that if you're going in to treat a foal, you might get some feces on your gloves. You can remove that outer glove and still have an inner glove with which you can get out of the stall, close the stall door, and take off your protective equipment if you're wearing any. And obviously foot dips, as we've mentioned. Employing a dedicated staff to a particular area can be very helpful because that team can really get trained up and work in unison in a minimalistic way in terms of not having large numbers of extra people coming in and out. And that team being trained up and dedicated to that area can be a very effective component of a biosecurity protocol. As we mentioned, dedicated tools can transmit disease from one place to the next. So some farms will employ a situation where they have tools for each particular stall. If you choose not to do that, particularly in the face of an outbreak, then being able to clean those tools off with a big vat of disinfectant in the barn aisle can be very helpful, letting them sit in that disinfectant, making sure they're all soaked before taking those forks, brooms, shovels to another stall. It is also very important that you work with your clean stalls before you work with foals that are suffering disease and are in an isolation situation if you have to use shared equipment or shared staff in that regard. Always work from clean to dirty. Now, in terms of leaf blowers not being good, these vacuum machines can be very helpful. They represent a pretty good investment, and as you see here, this is a university hospital that has strict biosecurity protocols, and they are employing this vacuum cleaner that will show you how good it can be. The bags on these vacuum cleaners can be disinfected in a big bucket or vat of disinfection, and you can have interchangeable ones so that you can change them out on a regular basis. But the aerosol particles only go a very, very short distance from that bag. It's a very good way to control your sweeping process in the barn. Let's talk about disinfectants for a second. And they are not all created equal. In fact, we should consider that bleach is not an adequate or an appropriate or an effective disinfectant for horse barns. And the reason is that it is so easily inactivated by organic material. It may kill, as it says, 99.9% of germs, but that is only tested on a pretty much clean stainless steel surface, not the environments that we find in our barns. Now, here we have a table looking at lots of different disinfectants, and some of them are actually combination products where there is a disinfectant and a detergent product mixed together. And those can be very helpful as long as we put some elbow grease in to make sure that the detergent can actually remove the organic material in the environment that we're trying to clean up. Let's look at this a little more carefully. It's a bit overwhelming. So we can rule out several of these products because they're costly, toxic, and inactivated by organic material. That leaves a few other categories of compound, and we can see here that the quaternary ammonium compounds that we used to turn to in the past all the time, that they are heavily inactivated by small amounts of organic material, by hard water, by soaps, and by certain detergent products. So we don't recommend those for use with rotavirus. What are useful are products of the peroxygen or phenolic compounds groups. And examples of those include Virkon S, Rescue, and Tektrol. Now, I would stress that the University of Kentucky does not endorse any products. These are merely examples. And so in summary, rotavirus is an incredibly contagious pathogen. We have to try and encourage everybody to get on board when it comes to biosecurity. One dirty hand can be ruinous. We need to try and set up routines that everybody buys into, starting simple on a routine basis, and then obviously cranking that up when we have a problem at hand. We need to use our resources wisely, and we need to not be afraid to ask visitors to stay away for the health of their foals. Now, in terms of testing for disease pathogens, we recognize that there is significant cost involved with that. However, it is important that we, as a community within our industry, work together to make sure we do diagnose the pathogens that we're dealing with. And the reason is not only to appropriately deal with them and employ appropriate biosecurity measures, but also we need to be able to help you. And to be able to help you, we need to know what pathogens we're seeing, on how many farms, how many animals are affected, so that we can win research funding to continue to develop the tools that you need. And obviously our overarching goal in this situation is to try and develop tools and vaccine candidates so that we can protect our foals going forward. Please don't hesitate to contact us at the university. My contact information is at the top of this slide, and you can probably reach anybody within our university system, but we are here to try and help provide you with resources. Good luck and thank you.